kidney stones sound like the worst.
I think they are the worst. I literally think it's been compared to childbirth.
I mean, as a man, I'm just going to say this right now. I hope it never happens to me. I've seen people out there who have said on Facebook, I had a kidney stone. Two things happen. One, I'm like, there, but for the grace of God go I, or not better him than me, but, And the other thing I think of is like, well, I judge them. I'm like, what lifestyle choices led you to have this horrible thing happen?
Obviously. Yeah, right.
And then
drink some more water.
Yeah, who doesn't drink enough water, is too stressed out. I guess the first thing we should do is say this is the Be Well Now podcast.
Yeah, welcome everyone.
I'm Nick, the Curious Patient. Dr. Ron Dummar, how you doing, sir?
I'm doing great today.
You are the man with a plan. I am a patient of yours. We talk often about the meaning of life, medical issues, and all those things. And, kidney stones, like... You were saying that back pain can often be a precursor to a kidney stone. And so we wanted to talk about today things that could be signs you're getting a kidney stone or urinary tract infection, and then what you can do to alleviate that and not have it happen. But first, could you give us a quick intro? Why should anybody listen to you about kidney stones?
Yeah, well...
by the way, I'm going to drink some water.
Yeah, go right ahead.
To hedge against said subject.
Get yourself some hydration. Get that urinary tract moving for you there, for sure.
Gallon.
So I'm Dr. Ron Dummar. I'm a chiropractic physician specializing in functional medicine, and I'm a Chinese medicine doctor as well. My practice here in Heber, Utah, we prescribe a lot of herbals out of. I have a fully functional herbal pharmacy with over 300 individual single herbal extracts, and we mix those together for our patients based on their presenting complaints. And so we really believe we do here individualized medicine. It's personalized medicine to the complaints of each patient, not just general McDonald's slap it and order it like a menu.
Well, and I see all these videos online, and everyone searches for health things, I have this wart, hand wart. What does it mean? And all of a sudden you've got cancer and you're going to die. And
so I hope not.
But the thing is, this, right? And I think that's the nuanced nature of you, is to say, here's a lot of information, seek out a natural health practitioner to really get it dialed in. And that's kind of frustrating because it's an instant gratification society. Like, I just want to know what I want to know now.
Well, yeah, Google has really created that for us, right? And the internet has created this opportunity where we can have really rapid answers. Unfortunately, those answers aren't always the most pointed at our exact condition. And sometimes we have the same or similar condition to another patient or another person, but ours is going to be more effectively treated using a different approach. For instance, some of our patients who have infections, GI infections, they may have a bacterial infection or a bacteria that responds more to grapefruit seed extract, while another one responds more to uva ursa, and another one still.
How could you
mess that up, right? I mean, everybody knows how to pronounce that. Another one still may respond to, say, food-grade hydrogen peroxide or silver.
Well, you're way above my pay grade here, which is obviously what you do, and I'm not you, and all those things. But we're talking about UTIs, and we're talking about kidney stones. So let's get started there.
So maybe some background for this discussion is understanding the urinary tract. So there are certain parts of the urinary tract that we have to understand as well. Well, one of those is the kidney. The kidney is part of the urinary tract. And the role of the kidney is to really separate and disperse the turbid fluid from the clear and the clean fluid.
What do you mean the turbid fluid?
So it's trying to get rid of, essentially the idea is it's trying to get rid of toxins and leftover debris.
The kidney's doing that?
Kidney.
Is it like the last step?
It's like a detoxification, your body's elimination process, okay?
Unlike the liver, though. I feel like the liver also does that.
The liver cleans the blood directly. So the kidneys work through more of the fluid metabolism and excretion of the body. And the liver cleans the blood. So the liver will receive the blood, it receives it all day long. But we usually look, especially in Chinese medicine, as the liver being most active between 1 and 3 in the morning. And it receives the blood, it takes the blood up, and it moves through the liver. And we have these kind of square type of looking cells in the liver called hepatocytes. And they have these little sensors, and what they'll do is they'll reach out and test the blood, and they'll check it and say, okay, how much sugar is in there? Are there any toxins, or are there any heavy metals or things that need to be removed? And if there are, we will remove it. The liver will remove that and prepare it for elimination. Elimination can happen in a variety of ways. If we have a properly functioning bowel, it can eliminate it by dumping it into the bile and clearing it out through the bowel. If we don't have a properly functioning bowel, it can eliminate it by packaging it up in a fat molecule and trying to store it around in different places in the body.
Okay, so that's the liver.
That's the liver.
And then the kidney is working to secrete the bad stuff through our urine?
Yes, so the kidney works to balance. One of the main functions of the kidney is to maintain the fluid level within the body. So if we start to have too much fluid, we need to excrete some of it, right? So it's maintaining the fluid within the cell, the cellular space, and the extracellular space. So the kidney, by balancing, say, potassium and sodium, by balancing those minerals, it plays a significant role in how much fluid we actually have in our body. And obviously, if we have a kidney problem, kidney dysfunction, we can start to have swelling in our legs or our ankles, and swelling in different places in the body. And that's a sign that we're not properly metabolizing or filtering or eliminating fluid from the body.
So is that why you mentioned back pain could be a sign that you're potentially getting or having?
So the thing with back pain is once we get to a point where we're developing a stone, or we begin the process of developing a kidney stone, usually when you have a stone in the kidney, you don't feel it. You're not feeling it when it's in the kidney itself. Once it moves its way into the ureter, which is that tube, it's like a tiny straw that moves from the kidney itself down to the urinary bladder. Once it moves its way into that tube, that's when you start to feel the pain. And that tube, you can imagine your kidneys are located kind of just below your rib on your side there. And if you go to the back portion where your kidney is located, then you can see that could mimic back pain. In fact, a lot of patients will feel, we call it flank pain or side pain. They'll feel a little bit in their back, and it might radiate over to their hip a little bit. And this is an early sign of a potential kidney stone. And so, yes, a lot of patients will come to us with back pain, and they'll complain about pain that's here that kind of radiates around the hip. And if you're working on that and you do muscle work and tissue work, or you adjust it, and they're like, I don't know if it really had much effect, well, then the flag should be going up. Oh, well, maybe we're dealing with more internal rather than structural and muscle issue. So how would a patient develop that? That's another question, right? I mean, you're going to ask me that, I guess.
But I have all kinds of curious questions about it all, but I don't know what the difference between a kidney do women get kidney stones?
Yeah, anyone can get kidney stones based on diet. So a kidney stone's really made up of minerals. So minerals that congeal. As the kidney is filtering a lot of these minerals and eliminating, it decides what to keep and what to eliminate, right? And so as it's doing that, it can have certain minerals that coalesce and get in there. Now imagine you're not drinking to a very sufficient amount, and you have now he's drinking again. So then you have fluid. So your fluid will essentially start to congeal just naturally. If you think of a river in the summertime, what can happen to it naturally is it's just steaming, the sun's beating on it, and you can have the fluid just dissipate, right? Well, if you've ever walked on a more of a dried out creek bed, not totally dry, but it's like still got little puddles, that's more of what we're talking about, like dehydration, right? On the other end of that, you can have rushing, gushing, overconsumption of fluid and water and just overly running fluid, right? Well, what we're talking about in this case is getting more to that dry creek bed where you're walking around and you see these little puddles and pools. Well, those puddles and pools, they look like they're full of sediment. They're not real clean, right? Whereas with the water that's more of a nice, smooth run, that's a very clean, clear, well-maintained water. And so when the water in the kidney and the ureter, just like in the environment, starts to congeal or pool as a result of just less intake and not enough fluid, you're naturally going to have more coalescing of minerals. And where you have more coalescing of minerals, there's a greater likelihood of these ionic bonds for these minerals to just link up and combine, right, and to start forming stones. So some of them can be a result of overconsumption of calcium. We can have calcium oxalate stones. We can also have uric acid crystal stones or crystals. They're called stones still, but they're uric acid crystals. And that's a similar type of thing as gout. So again, those foods that may be higher in calcium, if someone has an affinity or is looking to reduce their likelihood of developing a calcium oxalate stone, you'd want to watch your intake of calcium. And I would say make sure that you're consuming calcium in food-based forms as opposed to supplementing, especially if you're concerned with this. The other area, uric acid, you're looking more at things like cheese and wine and alcohol and things like that are going to increase your likelihood of developing uric acid crystals.
And that's attached to gout?
Yes, and it's more of a metabolic type of disorder. Okay, so it's like digestion, liver, GI, things like that.
The more time I spend chatting with you about health, the more I realize it is like all connected.
Everything is connected.
Everything's connected. A positive social interaction that day, I feel like could change the whole physiology of your body. And I don't know anything about how it all works, but it's amazing how just something like that can change. It's like a flood of cascade of everything, let alone like all the stuff you put in your body food-wise. It's just every decision you make contributes to the whole thing.
And literally it does. Like you bring that up, and if we'll take a bit of a detour here for a moment, I really like that because I want to focus for a moment, and maybe we'll do a podcast on this as well, but just on that idea of having a positive interaction and the impact physiologically that can have, and the impact that can have on your relationships. So there was this time when I was in school and studying, and my wife and I, we were talking about different things, and we had just received some news that, well, we weren't super happy about with regards to some family members. And we were a little bit on edge and trying to process this and figure out, okay, how to do this. Do we come together? And each of us were trying to figure it out, right? And it felt a little bit heavy, But as a result of that, too, we bought into that heaviness. And then what it led to was got short, snippy, right? Snappy with each other, just kind of like, well, what about this? And then you're kind of crude or just rude to each other. And there was one moment I remember with our kids. We had 2 kids at the time as well. And we just looked at each other and we said, what are we doing? What's most important here? And how do we address this? And so we got down as a family and we did a meditation and a prayer. And we focused on resolving this issue, right? So initiating essentially a positive experience. And we got up from that, and the energy and the interaction and the way we were speaking to each other and the way our kids were not bothering us as much anymore completely changed. And you think about something like that and the direction it could have pointed us in, and if we continued to toy in and play in that energetic spot, it could have led to a very detrimental physiological ailment. And so, yes, it affects your physiology. When
stress, absolutely. Yeah.
Yes.
Which I think stress could be a big contributor to something like a kidney stone.
Yes.
But how?
So stress it affects the kidney and the adrenals specifically. So kidney adrenals the adrenals sit right on top of the kidneys. Okay. The kidneys actually, they release cortisol. What a lot of people don't realize is that your kidneys actually secrete sex hormones, androgens, estrogens. It's a regulator of our for a female of our cycle. And it's a regulator of the release of testosterone and the production of semen for a man as well. So the kidney and the adrenals play a significant role in this. So here we are with the kidney. If the kidney responds to stress, what it does is it sends out cortisol. Cortisol is like helping our body, in a sense, to respond to stress. It's also when we have cortisol dumped into our blood, it releases sugar. It's supposed to push sugar into the cells, and then boom, we would wake up and we'd have energy, right? So it's like giving us a spurt of energy. So if we're doing this repeatedly, so moments of stress are good. We need to have moments of stress. Chronic stress, repeated stress, and stress that is pushed to the point of overwhelm, that's where we can start to topple over and then develop more physiological problems or conditions. So organs themselves can be taxed. The kidney can be deficient, okay? And if the kidney is performing in a manner that is deficient, its role is to separate and eliminate certain minerals. And if those minerals are not being excreted properly, now we're holding on to certain minerals, okay? And if we start holding on to those minerals or retaining them, well, we can build up a kidney stone. We could also develop a kidney or urinary tract infection somewhere along the line. Again, if we're not drinking enough fluids, or if the kidney itself is simply deficient and overtaxed, overburdened. Kidney, from a Chinese medicine standpoint, again, is our root of our energy source. It's like the life force.
No kidding.
It's the life force for the body. And it regulates fertility. It regulates, again, like I said, it releases and manages and regulates hormones in the body, right? This is something I think is really important. And again, we seem to be taking some caveats, and maybe this is a detour, maybe it's not. But I think this is a really important discussion when it comes to the health of the kidney, because it plays a significant role in female health in general. And that is that before a female starts menstruating and before a male's testes drop, there is something still that is regulating the hormones. And the question is, what is that? Because women are told on the later end of life, after their season of fertility has expired, that they must replace hormones. People may have heard of hormone replacement therapy. And they're told all the time, you have to replace your hormones because you're not making hormones anymore. Your ovaries have dried up, so you have to replace that function. Well, the question is, what was performing the function before those ovaries were doing it? Because
I've got a guess.
Go ahead.
The kidneys?
The kidneys.
Hey.
There we go. Yes. And we know now as well through some of our modern research and science that it's not just the kidneys. In Chinese medicine, we look at each of these organs as a system, okay? And so as a system, they each have a responsibility. Kidney actually happens also, believe it or not, think about this, to be an important regulator in the health of the bone. So bone health. Well, what is bone made of? It's made of minerals, right? We have minerals. It's a very dense mineral makeup and structure in our bones. And what regulates the excretion of or the retention of minerals in our blood? So it can be available if needed for bone remodeling. If we break a bone, the kidney is responsible for that. So that's a significant thing. So before a female starts menstruating and a man starts having his testes drop and his voice change, the kidney is regulating hormones in the body, in addition to the kidney, the pituitary, the hypothalamus. Okay, there's this kind of triangular axis there that works together to regulate hormones. So that's really where we should be focused when we're talking about health and health of the kidney. And especially when we're addressing hormones and hormone health, we should always be addressing that axis. And if we're not addressing that axis, we're just looking at the patient saying, oh, I drew your labs and here's your hormones. You know what? They're at these levels, and so I'm going to give you a little bit of this and a little bit of that and a little bit more of this. And we're constantly just changing and adapting those. All we're doing in that case is painting the leaves of that condition. Meaning, as opposed to where is the production of this leaf coming from? What produces the leaf?
The root cause.
The root, exactly. The root produces it, right? So we need to go back and say, or go upstream, as some people like to say, or go down into the earth and say, what's going on at the root level and how do we support the roots? Well, what's at the root of hormones in the body? The kidneys. Kidneys, adrenals, pituitary, hypothalamus.
Okay, so urinary tract infection, have we talked about that?
No, we briefly mentioned it, but
I guess I want to know like how to prevent these things from happening, but do you want to touch on the UTI real quick?
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that something just women get?
Again, no, but it is more frequent with women.
Okay.
And one of the I have a funny story here for you on this, because the first time that I got a UTI was soon after I had gotten married, and this is frequently happens, right? This is one of the main recommendations we have is make sure that you urinate after intercourse or after sex, right? And there's a reason for that.
Everybody, men and women?
Men and women, yep. Now, I went into the doctor's office and I sat there and the nurse did my intake and she was good and kind and very efficient like they are. And she did a good write-up, and then I was left in a room waiting for the doctor to come. The doctor walks in and he looks at me and he goes, UTI, huh? I don't even know what he meant at that time. I didn't have any medical background or training or anything. I was still in my undergrad. And I looked at him, I was like, are you going to take away the hurt? Like it burns. And when I pee, it burns, and I'm bleeding. There's red in the toilet, right?
Oh
like it hurts. It was painful.
Whoa.
So he's like, yeah, just take this, you'll be fine. I said, well, what do I do? How do I prevent this from happening? And he just looked at me and kind of laughed. He goes, well, usually it's because, usually it happens in women because the urethra is so short, and it rarely happens in men because the urethra is so much longer. And I'm like, what? I didn't even understand what he meant. But essentially, he's explaining the urethra is the last part. So you have your kidney and then your ureter, which is that straw-like tube. And then you have the bladder, which everybody knows. The bladder, that's the part that you're like, oh, my bladder is going to explode, right? So the bladder is basically a hollow, empty organ that's designed to hold fluid and keep it there until you can maybe at a convenient time release that fluid. And it gives you a signal of when to release it, right? So where you release it is through the last tube called the urethra. The urethra is that last tube. Well, obviously in a male, that tube is longer than in a female. And I wasn't sure if maybe he was telling a joke, assuming that my tube was much smaller, right, than someone else's. But anyway, that's a bad joke.
Like, where are we going?
But the point
the logic
being,
doesn't make sense that he was saying that, though.
Well, yeah, because he's saying usually it happens in women and usually doesn't happen in guys. And so I was saying, how do I prevent it from happening? He's like, it'll probably never happen to you again. That's kind of what he was saying, right? But he didn't give me any tips. He didn't tell me what to do or how to prevent it. And so that was one of my first areas as well where I started thinking, man, I'm gonna go figure out how to prevent this because that is not something I want to experience again.
So is this one of the times that kind of signaled you toward where you're at now in terms of natural medicine, or were you already on the path?
No, I wasn't. At this time, I wasn't on the path at all at that point. And so it probably was one of the early things for me to begin to say, oh, maybe I need to take a little more interest in what's going on in my body physically.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And by me taking an interest in that, maybe this is something that I could do well at and be a benefit in some way to other people.
So as frustrating as that was for you, maybe you wouldn't be here today without it, right? Everything happens for a reason.
Yeah, thanks a lot. And thank you, doctor.
Thanks
to everyone, that nurse, and thank you all very much. I appreciate it.
So did we miss part of that story?
No,
Okay.
you heard all the story that needs to be heard.
It needs to be told.
Probably more than needed to be heard.
Kids after sex, pee. That's what we learned today. So UTIs don't sound like much fun at all. How do we prevent them?
So prevention of a UTI. The first one is going to sound really obvious, and I've described it a little bit with the fluid, and that's drink more water. Drink more water and have it be water for hydration purposes too. So it's minerals, has minerals in it. It's not just straight H2O. But the fact of just moving fluid through is so important in the urinary tract, through the kidney, the ureters, the urinary or the bladder and the urethra. It's so important to just move water over it. Not continuously, but it does need to happen. Now imagine this. If we did not have a bladder, what would be happening? Now this goes back to the liver and gallbladder. We can think about it this way. People might be able to understand it a little bit this way too. If we did not have a gallbladder, and many people get their gallbladder removed, well, what happens if you get your gallbladder removed? The liver is secreting and producing bile, and it dumps it into the gallbladder. And it dumps it into the gallbladder for the purpose of digesting fats. But you're not eating fats constantly or all the time. In fact, you're not eating a big steak or a meal like that requires it. And so the gallbladder will hold on to it until there's a time when it needs to be secreted in large amounts, in which time it will go contract, and then it will secrete it into the intestines. And that helps us to be able to break down our fats more readily, okay? So the bladder, again, imagine if we didn't have a urinary bladder and it just dripped straight down through here, what would happen is the same thing that happens without that gallbladder. Without the gallbladder, it's just dripping, 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 dripping constantly. So it's this drip of bile that's going in there and maybe helping us digest fats a little bit, but you don't have a significant amount of it, so it's not really helping you when you're actually eating a fatty meal. On the flip side, again, going back to the kidney and the urinary tract, the bladder, if we didn't have a bladder, we'd just be dribbling the whole time.
That sounds miserable.
That would be horrible, right?
A lot of depends.
Yes, and the bladder expands and opens up, and we have that feeling or that sensation when it starts to get too full that says, release me, it's time to release me. Well, if we keep sediment or fluid, if it stays in the bladder, think of that sediment in the river again, we can develop an infection. So regular, typical fluid that's floating through and bacterial culture that's moving through, if it's excreted and it's moving at a proper rate and it's excreted regularly, it's fantastic, no problem. But if it stays and it harbors into the wall, it can become a bladder infection. And that, if we get an infection in the bladder, it can also move its way, say, onto or into the urethra. We can also have those areas affect the ureter, or the bacteria affect the kidney as well. Kidney infections are very rare because at that point it's typically just moving and dripping and processing and dripping and processing and dripping. We don't have really a lot of retention control over it. So one of the main recommendations that I would have on top of consuming water is to regularly excrete that water, right? And
so try not to hold it.
Don't hold it. Yeah, don't hold it. If you can do your best to, I like to say to people, if you're near a restroom, use it.
Just in general.
Just use it. Yeah. And yeah, you might be like, oh, that person goes pee a lot, right? And I'm like, yeah, okay. But at least you're not like in a situation where you're having to hold your bladder so long that you're retaining it and you end up with a bladder or a kidney infection, or you feel like you can't drink because you're afraid if you do drink that you'll have to pee so much, right? And then you end up with the same type of thing, because even if you're not, let's say you're not drinking, so now you're dehydrated, well, the same type of thing can happen. We can have fluid that just pools in there, bacteria that's on the wall naturally, but it's not moving through quickly enough. And so we can develop an infection, okay?
So definitely use the bathroom a lot and drink a lot of water.
Drink a lot of water and urinate. Now, ready for some other tips?
Let's do it.
So some of the things that I like is you want to take to use something that's going to help you to get that bacteria off of the wall, because typically it's on the wall of the bladder is where the bacteria kind of it embeds itself and then hangs in there, or it's on the wall of the urethra, the epithelial layer, or the ureter, and you want to help that bacteria get off of the wall. One of the ways that you can do this is with D-mannose. It's a sugar, but the bacteria generally is attracted to it, and it will release itself from the wall and bind to the D-mannose, and then that will be excreted out. Both of them will together.
Excreted in your urine or
in the urine,
okay.
Through the urine. So the other thing that you can do.
D-mannose is a supplement.
Yeah, it's a supplement that you can buy. You could get it at natural grocers. Probably most
D-M-A-N-N-O-S?
D-M-A-N-N-O-S-E.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So D-mannose is a good one. I also like to use uva ursi is a good one too. I like to utilize sometimes food grade hydrogen peroxide, but I wouldn't recommend starting with those. And sometimes I like to use silver. Those are probably my secondary go-tos. More my primary, I like to be less invasive. So my primary go-tos are things like the D-mannose, and then I'll do like higher doses of vitamin C. And then I have a product I called Uri Clear, and it's a product that I made with a variety of different herbals in it that help specifically with antibacterial and antiviral effect. Now, what are food things that you can do? Let's talk about certain foods that you could consume that will help with reducing the likelihood of an infection, a UTI, and also reduce the likelihood of producing stones. Well, one of the things that you could get let's say a dual benefit, you're reducing the likelihood of a gout flare-up and reducing the likelihood of a stone formed from uric acid in the kidney, would be tart cherries, tart cherry juice, right? Tart cherries, if you can eat or if they're in season and you can eat the cherries themselves, they're fantastic and have a variety of different anthocyanidins, different antioxidants and things in them that will help reduce the likelihood of the buildup of uric acid. So that's one thing that you can do. And another thing that you can do to reduce the likelihood of stones, as we talked about before, is reduce your intake of breads, pastas, cheeses like fine, cheeses, and wine and alcohol. So those
all the good stuff.
I know, right? Those tend to increase the production of uric acid in the body. For stones as well, a dandelion root tea is really good. I like dandelion a lot. And I even think taking some dandelion, if you have some fresh dandelion or can find some good dandelion that's not sprayed or had things on it, pick the leaves and put it in your salad. And they're antiviral and antibacterial. And there's been recent research that's shown that it's also anti-cancer, tumorigenic. So it can help with preventing and reducing the proliferation of cancers. So dandelion is something as well that can be a benefit to patients.
I don't want a kidney stone.
No, or a UTI.
Or
a
UTI.
Kidney infection, yeah.
I've been drinking a lot of water. The bladders.
I noticed you've been drinking a lot of water. You're probably going to have to go here pretty soon.
It's sending me signals. Did we miss things? I know you are a very thorough human, and I'm grateful for that. That's what I want in someone who's a doctor, health practitioner. You get in the weeds, and thank God, because I don't, you know what I mean? So I see you looking at your phone. Sometimes you come up with notes, not because you don't know the stuff, but because I know you don't want to miss it, because your brain likes to.
There were a couple of things I wanted to mention because they're home things. I like to have things that people can do and have recommendations they can do from home as well. Two things, lemon water, and we've talked about lemon water a lot on this podcast, and then also basil water, basil leaf, just kind of making a tea out of it, okay? Now, lemon...
That sounds rough.
Oh, yeah, basil. Delicious. I've like eating a thing of pasta or something, huh?
In your water.
In your water. So lemon, though, the lemon juice, it contains ascorbic acid. So ascorbic acid is an acid actually that helps to counteract the production of the calcium oxalate and the uric acid formation. And basil contains acetic acid, which also helps to counteract. So, I mean, if you're not so fond of basil, you can just go for the lemon. But if you're really wanting to hit it out of the park, you could try basil. You could try lemon and basil. But those are both things that are very beneficial for patients as well at home.
Good stuff. Lemon water feels like the superhero. Feels like there's so many reasons to drink it.
There's a lot of reasons to consume lemon, that's for sure, to help with clearance from the liver, to soothe the liver, to help with detoxification, for your vitamin C content, even getting a little bit of the pith or the peel of the lemon, that white part, is so good for your digestion. So yeah, there's a lot of great reasons to consume lemon of all varieties.
Including lemon water?
Mm-hmm.
Can I drink lemon water at night?
Yeah. Yes. Now you can drink at night. Again, you just have to be careful that how late you drink and know that you're going to have to wake up and go to the bathroom. I always like to be hydrated. For me, that's my key. And first thing in the morning, I like to drink at least 2 glasses of water.
What about at night, though? Because I tried to drink a lot of water yesterday, as per your recommendation, and I didn't wake up at night, but I felt it in the morning. And it was just this close to...
Like you really had to get up and go, you're saying?
Yeah, it was this close to, like, I definitely would have woken up at night because I had to go.
It was your alarm.
It was my alarm.
Yeah, there you go.
The natural
alarm. Are you
alarm
thanking
clock.
me, or are you complaining? I'm not sure.
Oh, my gosh. Everyone's talking about getting up early and rise and grind and get it. Just drink water all the time.
Just drink water, dude, and you'll get up.
At 2 a.m.
You'll be like, what time were you up this morning? 3. And then I was up at 4. And then I was up at 5. And then I stayed up. Oh, gosh.
Lemon water, ice baths.
I usually say to drink.
Crazy things.
To try to have your last drink about 2 hours before bed.
Okay. That's good.
Yeah.
Wise words.
Yeah, I mean, if you are feeling the pain, okay, if you're feeling the pain of a kidney stone, well, you can apply heat to it. One of the treatments that they'll often do for kidney stone is they'll do probably one of the better treatments for it too, but they'll do ultrasound, like high frequency, high grade ultrasound, where it just breaks up. It's a sound frequency, and it's sending it in at a certain frequency that irritates it and breaks it up, the stone. And it can be painful. And when we talk about ultrasound, people often think of, isn't that what we do to detect if there's a baby? And yes, that's true, but the wave is so much different that we're looking for more of an echo. In the lithotripsy is what it's called. When you ultrasound a stone, you're really looking to penetrate through that space and irritate it as much as possible to break it up. But that is definitely a treatment option that they have. They do have other more invasive options where they can go up the urethra and with a scope and pull it out. We definitely don't want those. More often than not, by increasing your hydration, drinking lots of water, you can push it out and move it along yourself. But on occasion, on a very rare occasion, they do get lodged and need to be treated.
What a great note to end the podcast on.
Right?
Is that it?
You said something about a deep dive. Was that a deep? That was deep dive.
That sounds like a deep. No, that's good. I'm just gonna drink more water. And then cranberry juice, is that good, or is that different than tart cherries?
I'm glad you brought up cranberry juice, and notice that I did not mention it.
It's so sour. Like I bought the natural organic kind one time, and it's like
$12
for and it's just
it's delish.
I'm doing this for the tract,
Yeah. Okay, so there's not a lot of real solid evidence behind cranberry juice for the urinary tract, and I'm everywhere I read cranberries kind of recommended, on the sites and different things like this. When you look at just what's out there in the social network, it's kind of cranberry. Well, there's not really a lot of evidence out there to suggest that cranberry reduces, especially if there's an active urinary tract infection. I think there's some evidence to suggest that it will prevent or prophylactic. So if you just every now and then are going to have some cranberry juice, but you have to make sure it's the cranberry juice that's not full of sugar, because the sugar is going to cause a lot of problems as well. And more often than not, people are drinking the cranberry. It's like I'm drinking cran apple or cran grape, and it's a sugary drink of some sort. And so I don't know that we're really getting the benefit out of the cranberry in that instance. But if you want to use cranberry prophylactically in a way to, like you said, I'm doing it for the tract, right? That's probably a good idea. But if you're trying to treat a current urinary tract infection, I would use other herbals, some of which we've talked about today, and additional strategies that we can cover another time as well.
Well, you can send these herbals, right?
Yeah.
Through the mail. So if they're
for sure.
curious about these herbals and they want to get in touch with you, how do they do that?
Yeah, so they can reach out to us at CHW Heber. That's short for Community Health and Wellness, chwheber.com. And you can text our phone number actually as well. Our phone number is 435-657-3696. And you can actually text that number, and we'll get those. My front desk screens all of that for me. So they'll get that information if you're looking for a virtual consult or a visit or wanting some information on herbals. You can certainly shoot it there, and we can set something up.
All in the hopes of
keeping that UTI clear.
And being
or
well.
That UT clear.
Now. Yeah. And doing it for the tract.
Yeah. Be well now.
We're trying to be cool. I think having a non-kidney stone life is cool.
It's super cool. It's it's certainly inflamed to have a kidney stone filled life.
Hey man, when you're not well, nothing's good. So we're just trying to help you be in the present moment.
Be well now.
Be well now. Namaste.
Namaste.